Greetings, fellow armchair Imagineers. Blue Dragon 5 here.
And Jacob Weil.
And Casey.
Ladies and gentlemen, as we find ourselves in the midst of Disney's big venture into the world of streaming, having started a war in the process, we thought it'd be nice to stay up to date on the ever growing catalog and rule on what's a must or a bust on Disney Plus.
And tonight, we're doing something interesting. We're going over Mandalorian Season 3. We're covering all of the 8 episodes in one big Season 3 wrap up.
Yeah. So, you're probably wondering what the heck could they possibly have to say after talking about all 8 episodes this season? Well, we didn't have Casey before, and we now know how it all ends. So we have things looking back upon it to wrap up. So that's where we are with things. So Casey, overall, how did you feel about season 3? Like overall?
Overall, I thought it was very mid at best. I don't think it was a great season by any means. It wasn't horrible either, but I did have a lot of issues with it, which I guess really is no different from some of the issues that I took with season 1 and season 2. But I would definitely say by far, this was probably the worst season of the 3. And just to clarify, I still very much enjoyed it, but there were issues, and I think those issues definitely need to be acknowledged.
Okay, Jacob.
I mean, you basically had I was on for almost every single episode this season, like maybe one or two that I wasn't on for, but so basically overall, yeah, I would pretty much agree. Like, I still probably enjoyed the season very much, but in terms of like ranking each, like if you take every episode as a strength or a weakness, I'd say this one has the most weaknesses compared to the others. But I still say overall, despite it being uneven, it was still an enjoyable season, but still not up to the same level of quality as we've seen from the previous two.
So when I look back on Mando season 3, I love Mandalorian, I do. And I think overall it's revitalized Star Wars in a big way. You know, it's like season 1 that we're going back to basics and what we should be focusing on with Star Wars. You know, just kind of like kind of imagine kind of the old genre stuff, and we kind of have a very very direct, very simple story. You know, very simple goals. And then season two, it begins to slowly open, the door, with possibilities, and we kind of reveal the ultimate plan to why the heck we're getting all these Star Wars shows, mainly the Filoni of it all, which is, again, we're Book of Boba Fett particularly kind of, and the Book of Boba Fett and Ahsoka of it all. You know, we have like the MCU playbook of crossovers and building towards a bigger story. It seems, which we've had confirmed with this Mandoverse movie that is on its way. How soon, the world may never know. But yeah, the viewership. I feel the viewership on season 3 was very divisive because I suspect the wait between Mandalorian seasons, I think, really died down the hype in the first place. Like, for me, looking back on things, it feels like Book of Boba Fett should have done the Mando stuff either in the last episode or in a season 2 of Book of Boba Fett because it kind of diverted focus from that character and his story. And again, it's interesting because again, Book of Boba Fett is kind of what it was building to ultimately, and why we did Mandalorian in the first place. But it ends up kind of in a tricky place where the Star Wars shows are kind of fighting for supremacy. It seems, and it's in waiting between through two Star Wars shows afterwards. You got Obi-Wan, you got Andor, which I think really hurt the hype for like Mando season 3. Where I mean, Book of Boba Fett. I mean, again, while maybe we shouldn't have crammed like almost half of it into that season, I think everyone's really hyped for Mando coming out of Book of Boba Fett. Justifiably or not, because that's his show. Regardless, I think that lowered the turnout based on how things played out. And season 3 ultimately, I think it delivered on what I was hoping for, what I wanted for the Mandalorian culture. I got everything I wanted there, pretty much. I feel one episode ultimately disrupted the flow of the narrative for me. But again, each season kind of has something to that degree. To I think a lesser degree in the previous two seasons. This one is more distracting than anything else. And we'll get there again. We'll retread that territory. But overall, it just feels like we may have had some plotting and some focus issues. Nothing against the overall story, but just in the way in which we told that story, it feels like we may have diverted some things, and we tried to they kind of like shake things up for the third season, and I think maybe to varying results. But I had a great time with it. I had a lot of there were a lot of unexpected turns through the season, which I rather enjoyed. I mean, in the story structure that we did get, I thought there were a lot of cool moments. So it was what I was looking for with Mando. There is we don't know 100% if we're gonna basically kind of like end it here and then we're gonna get the movie, or if there's gonna be a season 4 or not. But this season feels like it's closing the loop on the core show, which if it is, I think it's pretty well told. I think we hit a lot of marks. We paid off a lot of things within the three. Obviously, there's kind of a bigger thing that we're building to. But if this is it for Mando, I think we ended in a pretty good place, and we had a fun ride getting there. And it's this was less the big shock value that season 2 was with its finale, and kind of with what that story was building to. This is just more like, okay, this is what we were kind of going for all along in terms of the Din Djarin kind of character arc. So yeah, I think we did a good job with 3. Not great, but we did a good job.
So some of that stuff you just said, I definitely can I mirror. I just feel like, and it's something I can't remember what podcast the three of us were on before. If sometime last year, could have been the Book of Boba, but it's just like it's the same thing I have been criticizing since season 1, is that they really break their storytelling. They really break the flow of it. And this is an issue that I find that a lot of Disney shows have, is that they don't know how to effectively tell a story in a short format. Like Netflix is really good at having, shorter seasons that really just, go from plot point to plot point, beat to beat, constantly driving the story forward. And that's ultimately what I think Mando needs to do. Now, with having essentially no true limitation on the time frame that you could do, because we had episodes that are, I think, 38 minutes long, then in the 40s, then in the 50s, whatever, with not having that sort of time constraint, there's no real reason why you can't follow the very bare bones story of your A story and your B story. I think a really big missed opportunity is the episode in which you have, what is it? The third episode, The Convert.
Well, Casey, I might have to pause you there. So, we're going to break down all the episodes, so I don't know if you want to hold that point or you want to keep going with it. Just so you know,
it's just like a small detail, but the fact that like you had that entire episode dedicated to, Dr. Pershing, it's just like you could have stretched that out to different things, and that's the issue, is that you just have these like sort of episodics that, yeah, obviously always, episodic episodes do factor into the larger story of play, but it's usually more of character building. But that's one of my biggest issues with a number of these shows, and it's all these live action Star Wars things. The only good example is Andor. Andor is a fucking masterpiece, but with the Mandalorian, it's just like it's not very effectively told. And I swore they did say that there was a season 4 in play,
but that was before they revealed the movie, though, so it's kind of hard to tell if maybe that's folded over into that or not. So I don't know. But we still have like they still want to do so much more with this Mando universe, because we do have Ahsoka coming out, and then we have Skeleton Crew coming out, and then we have this other film that's, I'm assuming, a crossover event.
Mm-hmm. But it's just, I don't know. And then also, this is a criticism that, even a lot of other people have who aren't Star Wars fans. Like, for instance, I was talking to a friend of mine, probably after episode like 3 aired, where he was so confused and he said, I have no fucking clue what's going on, because he's like, last I remember, Grogu left with Luke. And I said, I was like, yeah, that is true. He did, but they gave the Mando 2 whole episodes in someone else's show to explain how you got there. So, like, unfortunately, you're going to have to kind of watch this other show if you want to know what the hell's going on. And that's ridiculous. That is
Yeah, it's not.
absolutely absurd.
Yeah.
Like, you could have easily either done a like one-off episode special that explained how Grogu comes back, or you could have given, the first episode, or have him absent, because in the reality of it, at least from my memory of the Book of Boba, I feel like that Mando storyline in everything that they did with Grogu, it wasn't necessary. You could have just had the Mando there helping Boba. Like, Grogu was not truly an important part of the story. They could have easily written him out, and I don't think it would have made much of a difference. That's my big thing.
Okay. All right. So, all that said, let's start breaking it down. Let's basically kind of like reflect on the episodes that we've gotten, knowing what we know now, and kind of having factored in kind of our feelings on them after these many weeks of watching.
All right.
Okay.
And we're doing something unique, something new this time. We're dedicating individual thumbnails, which are the reused ones from the individual episodes.
All right. So, the Apostate. This was directed by Rick Famuyiwa, who did the second episode for the first season, a bunch of other really impressive stuff.
All right.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, this is a great setup episode. We go full circle. Ultimately, what we reveal now that we now have all the episodes, we really went full circle and thematic with the opening. We open and close the season with Ragnar to a degree, with the Creed ceremony, which I always really liked because, to Casey's point, yes, the thing with Book of Boba Fett is that I loved the solo Mando episode we got. Of course, I love the Grogu episode, but particularly the episode that it reintroduced. Like, I think it's literally called the Mandalorian. If I can't recall, it's either Return of the Mandalorian or the Mandalorian.
It's called Return of the Mandalorian.
Thank you. That episode, I love that because that just it's already just a really good episode, but it has like this big dramatic kind of like framing of the dilemma for this season, which I think the ceremony neatly recaps, because episode 1 does recap certain things, but obviously if people did not, as Kay said, if people did not watch him being reunited with Grogu and the whole Luke thing, they are going to be a little lost as to what he's just randomly there, and he has like a little. He's got like a little pod in the N1, like, for some reason, all that stuff. So there are some looming questions, but in terms of summation for what we do get, I think it's a nice way of representing what Din's goal is right up front this season. That it's a connection to the Mandalorian culture, which again we're going to explore this season. We have a giant creature foreshadow already at the top, which is going to be a big thing for Bo-Katan. So all that's good. Just kind of a nice, restatement of the whole Boba Fett apostate dilemma that we set up. Let's see. So aside from that, in episode 1, we do here's where I think we get into one of the big flaws of season 3. The attempt to rebuild IG-11. So of course we all love IG-11. We all love to see him back, and I think it was a nice way to acknowledge, there was an attempt to bring him back. As in Star Wars, the recurring problem is that we keep bringing back the living people who should not, the dead people who should probably remain dead. But
even though his is excusable since he's a droid, as you're about to probably say.
Yeah. Anyway, so that's the thing. Droids, on the other hand, you can rebuild them till you're blue in the face. Problem is, you can have like a Wall-E dilemma. Unless you get that little kind of magic kiss of circuitry, there's not going to be any recognition there. No, your old friends are gone. So IG-11 goes haywire and tries to kill the baby, which is kind of a great catastrophe to see it. I love it. so IG-11 kind of serves like a red herring plot line. Up front, because the pro of what we're doing here is like, okay, we're gonna really misdirect the audience because they're gonna think, okay, like we all thought initially, like, okay, this season's gonna be, we're kind of laid out like the video game kind of quest path of what our whole season's going to be. Like, okay, we're going to A, B, C, D. There's going to be some pirates along the way, and eventually, probably by the finale, we're actually going to go back to Mandalore, which, I mean, to a degree, does still kind of happen, but it didn't take us forever to get to Mandalore in the first place. Like, we went there a time or two beforehand.
Yeah, I remember our when we first saw this, we laid out this ground. But I was like, okay, by episode 7, they're finally going to make it to Mandalore, and then then the last episode he's going to bathe in it.
Exactly. So that was the initial thought. So it's a nice kind of red herring we have there in IG-11. Seemingly was like a big detail. I'm like, oh, we're going to repair IG-11 along the way because we need him to get to Mandalore, and he's a reason we're not just going to go there in episode 2. But then we just completely abandoned that in episode 2. So it's a red herring, and we kind of get IG-11 back later, but I don't know if we quite earn it. But it's still good to see him back, and so it's more of a tribute than actually getting him back. And we'll get into maybe a little bit more of IG later. But so we kind of set that up here. We introduced the pirates. Hopefully, Jacob, hopefully it is a long con that is building to Hondo and Ahsoka. Like, in the broad sense of things, maybe Filoni's just sitting there in his chair in his Trapper Wolf costume with the hat on, and he's thinking, this is a running gag, by the way.
Like, if you notice in the description, I even word is like, it's ups, it's downs, and it's like of a certain pirate.
Yeah, just what if Filoni's like, okay, I'm gonna make people really want and expect Hondo, and they're because he's got to be in Ahsoka. If he's in any show, he's got to be in Ahsoka. But I'm gonna make people like get pirates on the brain, so when he comes back, it'll be a rejoicing event.
Like, did you miss me?
Yep. Of course you missed me. Hey, come here.
Of course, I didn't even need to ask. Of course you missed me. Come on, give a hug to your old pal Hondo.
Listen.
I love Hondo. I thought they were going to actually, on a somewhat side note, I thought they were going to bring him back in Bad Batch in the episode where that kid steals their ship. It had the little flaps and hat that reminded me of Hondo. But I thought that was interesting. I would love to see him in any of these shows.
Was that in season 1 or 2?
That was in the most recent season 2, when they were going into the mine for the fuel.
I don't know if I've seen that episode yet. Unfortunately, I haven't finished season 2 yet.
Okay. I mean, anyway, yeah, Hondo would be great to have back. Especially with everything that was going on with the pirates in this season.
They kind of teased him a couple times. Like maybe they didn't outright tease him, but I guess it was more like they either intentionally or unintentionally got our hopes up.
And when you think pirates in Star Wars, he is at the top of the list. So.
Yep, and not Gorian Shard or whatever his name is.
Yeah, not Gorian Shard. I mean, he's cool, but
I mean, don't get me wrong. Gorian Shard has a pretty cool design, but I just don't think he has the same staying power as someone like Hondo does.
Nope. Plus, he blows up, so no.
Yeah, Hondo never blew up.
No,
Gorian Shard, though, reminds me of Pizza the Hut from Spaceballs.
I mean,
I guess he's more like Lettuce the Hut.
Yeah, but that's the thing. It's that like similarity, you know. Yeah, but yeah, so with this episode, the apostate. I mean, I agree with the whole IG-11 thing. It really feels like it is almost wasted time in this season. Like there is a lot of time dedicated, even to the more subtle moments of like rebuilding IG-11 and then having his like shell as a mode of transportation for Grogu and all that other stuff. It's just weird. It doesn't feel like it pays off. And then also, even at the end of the day, when they rebuild him later, it's not really him.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. You're right. Ultimately, it is kind of it's an odd path that we get to getting IG-11 back, and it's just more of a tribute anyway. So it's weird.
Yeah, and then also too, given the title of this episode and the overall story of not fitting into a society or world that you once belonged to. So obviously being the apostate, him not fitting in with this culture. Not exactly jumping the gun here, but going back to what I was saying earlier about the convert, this would have actually been the perfect episode to have a B story with Dr. Pershing.
I mean,
You would have had to have rewritten his storyline a bit, but the fact that he is this man who had a very specific place within a very specific society and group, and now he's in a new world, so to speak, and he's got to fit in, he's got to fit into this new life, not doing the things he used to do. I think you could have easily had that be the B story and almost had this very interesting parallel between the two of them.
I mean, if you did that, I think the only way to go about like a reconfiguring the whole B plot structure of Pershing would be in a 3-act structure. Isn't if you picked 3 specific episodes in which you introduced like the paralleling arc, and then you had like for example, we probably pay it off in like 6, and we kind of have like that probably keep something in 3, and then just probably introduce it somewhere. I mean, I guess de facto probably this episode probably. But yeah, no, you're right. If we kind of had like kind of a tragedy of Pershing unfolding, that could be interesting, kind of broken up. I didn't think about doing that, but that's not a bad idea.
Yeah, well, that was my whole idea ever since episode 3, but I'll get more into that once we get to episode 3.
Yeah, exactly. Well, sure. I mean, there's other Pershing thoughts we should probably get to there. But let's see. So Babu Frick, fun little appearance of, well, at least the race of Babu. I assume one of them is Babu Frick, but let's just say the Babu Frick race. They're there, and I love it. It's like a surefire thing in the Mando formula here, but in a good way. Grogu doing baby things is adorable, like squeezing a little alien. It's freaking cute. Let's see. So we establish Bo-Katan's arc here. This is the big thing we do at the end of one. So that's the thing. Like looking back, so Bo-Katan's arc. We begin with her kind of moping on her cool-looking throne, which gets blown up in 2 episodes from now. And she lost the dark saber to her friend. She's she goes on an arc questioning her beliefs and kind of like basically defining what she believes in, and how she kind of comes back from things and kind of redeems herself. So again, like she kind of parallels Din Djarin's arc in kind of a redemption of sorts. Only hers has been kind of longer in the making, and her path to getting redemption is basically essentially walking the way of the Mandalore ultimately, in which she's basically got to like go back to her roots and kind of see what her actions have kind of wrought, incidentally or not, have kind of wrought, and just kind of like kind of walking in the other shoes of the other Mandalorians and kind of like learning from that. So yeah, there's always kind of a cultural thing with the Mandalorians. And now the more I think about it, because every time we do kind of a story, we either Mandalorian or Mandalorian adjacent, like Boba Fett, for example. Boba Fett, he kind of learned from the Sand People. Din Djarin's a foundling. Bo-Katan, again, she kind of she had a big hand in splintering things off, so she's kind of, she kind of caused like the Death Watch thing in the first place, or at least kind of had a hand in, kind of making it go big with Pre Vizsla.
And then ended up
Death Watch really was actually not anything to do with Bo-Katan. That has to do with back in the Clone Wars, they talk about how the Mandalore turned to a peaceful society. Mm-hmm. Death Watch was the splinter, that wanted to keep their old ways.
Right.
It was a preservation of their culture.
If anything, she more supported her sister.
Well, didn't she eventually? I guess I'm wrong. Didn't she eventually like go with like Pre Vizsla when like betraying your sister somehow? Your sister got killed, and I thought she felt guilty that she got her sister killed, probably because she somehow sided with the Death Watch gang.
You know what? Honestly, I can't quite remember.
Honestly, I don't either. I mean, I remember more Obi-Wan's side of things and in his relation to that story than actually Bo-Katan's and anything.
Well, I think she was feeling guilty for some reason. That is my presumption about what happened. But
yeah, the thing is that she. Okay, so I believe. Okay, wait. She. I think she was already a part of Death Watch, but
Mhm.
she didn't create Death Watch because, like I said, Death Watch was
It was Pretty Vizsla's
born.
baby, right?
Yeah, I think so. That sounds right.
And I
Was
don't.
that her sister Satine? She was a part of the government that was
Yeah.
trying to create more of a past. Yeah, but once again, though, like that Bo-Katan had nothing to do with the creation of Death Watch.
Well, sure. It's just the fact that it seems like,
and from what I understand, she didn't really approve of their more extreme methods either.
Okay. I don't know. Fair enough. Well, regardless, I guess I don't know. I guess the point being that she was associated with Death Watch, so basically she's kind of walking in, kind of like, I don't know. She's kind of re-exploring kind of some old roots, I suppose.
Yeah.
Anyway, so let's see. Okay, so here's something. Here's a missed opportunity for season 3 for me, though. Looking back on things that had occurred to me, it does feel a bit like a problem and a missed opportunity that we have her questioning her beliefs. This season is like she goes on quite the arc. Now, Din, on the other hand, we don't quite fully, like we don't get to a place where for the practical side of this season is Pedro Pascal's busy, so he can't take off his helmet. And we thankfully have a character who will allow him not to take off his helmet. But given this whole season's kind of an addressment of like, can he ever take off the helmet again? Like, are we getting to a place where that might be an option? And I wonder. It kind of bugs me looking back on it that we don't really raise the question to him about whether or not I should, because obviously it's a big deal, and that's why he went to practically kill himself to get the Mandalore and essentially rebaptize himself with the Creed ceremony, bathe in the living waters of the mines of Mandalore, all that. And it feels like we could go through all this with Bo-Katan. It feels like we probably should have paralleled that a little bit more with Din, kind of like, because this fact that we pair them up and I think they have a lot of good chemistry together, but also I think they really are representative of each other's characters and coming from different cultures and different sides of the coin, and having them kind of like cross over in a sense. I don't even say we fully have to have him take off the helmet, but it feels like we should like ask him how he feels about that after what he's been through. And we don't quite do that. I mean, how do you guys feel about that? Do you think we were fine as we played it, or like is it a missed opportunity?
So just the super condensed version. You're asking specifically about him keeping his.
Yeah, I'm asking, should we have asked him like how he feels about the helmet thing? Like, should he have taken the helmet off, or should we just like asked it? Like, should we have like a moment where someone asked him like, hey, you might be able to take your helmet off. Do you want to do that?
I mean, I'm fine with it being the way it is. Even the logistical side of like how it is in real life, with him being busy and really only doing the voice acting.
Mhm.
I mean, I'm fine with it.
I mean,
it's just something that's accepted. It's been established, and I think he is fine with it.
And don't you feel we should have like talked about it like at all? Honestly, not even just with him, just in general. By the end of this season, we have this place where I think it's written far too subtly that the Mandos might be allowed to take their helmets off now. I don't know if it's like the old guard are not immune to this, or at least the new ones getting the creed are not being told like, hey, you don't have to swear to never take your helmet off anymore. Like, I don't know where we or land with that.
I don't think that is the case. I think, they want to rebuild Mandalore and have Mandalore be comprised of their many different cultures. So I think their clan specifically, I think they will keep their helmets on.
Okay.
Because the armorer did say in the season, she said, about, Bo-Katan that like, you walk both paths. You can have your helmet off. You could do what you got to do to interact with people. But I think they're fine with that, and that's what they're going to do.
So as far as Pedro Pascal goes, if they can't have him like for majority of the season, they could probably like bring him on a day where he is available, and have him film a scene with his helmet off.
Sure. All right, anyway, let's see. So we also set up that Grief Karga is looking for a marshal to protect Navarro, which obviously is going to cause pirate troubles. And also, it's kind of a way of they kind of found a way to write out Cara Dune for a bit, and also, more importantly, we are reestablishing the New Republic stuff, which we're definitely going to see this season. And it's kind of like The New Republic is an issue kind of like the Accords in the Captain America Civil Wars, the Accords in the MCU, in which like these guys are they're going to bury in bureaucracy before they can do anything, being the risk of the danger of the Accords and kind of galactic order, which obviously is dangerously close to a First Order. But again, we'll explore that a little bit as we're setting all this up in one. So brings us to episode 2.
Chapter 18, The Mines of Mandalore.
This was directed by Rachel Morrison, who is a cinematographer by trade usually, and she's directed a little bit of TV stuff, but she has been a cinematographer on a lot of Ryan Coogler stuff, like Black Panther and Fruitvale Station.
Oh, I mean, this episode kind of did have like some of the more interesting visual shots in the series in the season, so that does make sense.
Case in point.
Fair enough. I didn't know that.
Yeah. So let's see. So after a little visit with Pele, because it seems like we gotta get her at least once per season. We got a little visit with Pele. We get R5 on Bunta Eve. I love the Bunta Eve thing because the Bunta Eve thing explains like why the pod racing's a thing. It explains like, oh yeah, pod racing like a ceremonial thing we do to. It's like Christmas for the Hutts practically.
Yeah, it's like what better way to celebrate the holidays than go into the races.
Yeah, I guess more like President's Day for the Hutts, but let's just let's go with the Eve. But yeah,
President's Day works well too. I guess.
I think it's more accurate, probably like a President's Day, like at least celebrating leadership, perhaps. I don't know.
I mean, watching races still sounds pretty good way to spend a holiday.
Yeah, so we have a reason for the pod racing. So anyway,
That's what I call pod racing.
Exactly. Wizard, Jacob, very wizard.
Thank you.
So we basically fast tracked the goal of season. This is episode 2. I really liked because it fast tracked the goal to season 3 a lot faster than I anticipated. We go to Mandalore already. We apparently we don't need IG-11. This is where again we kind of get into the tricky writing territory. Where now knowing where it all panned out, admittedly, it's this plot issue that I think the critics of this season really were highlighting that we're kind of like indecisive about. We're kind of going back and forth on things in the writing. Like, episode 1, we set up, okay, we need IG-11 to go to Mandalore, and we need this and we need that. And this episode right after it, again, you can make the argument for red herrings and just misdirects, but it just feels like, hey, episode 2, no, you don't need IG-11, you got R5, and you don't even need R5. You can just see. I didn't know you could pressurize. You can pressurize your helmet and walk out there and do it yourself. It's like, why did we need a droid in the first place? And the only reason we need a droid is so we can set him up for the finale when he helps out during the cool Phantom Menace homage. That's the only reason we need R5. That we need to ping the location of the Mandos to say that Grief Kargan needs help with the pirates. Those are the only 2 reasons we need R5.
Yeah, it doesn't like that's the thing. It just doesn't make sense. Like I wouldn't even say it's a red herring. It's just bad writing.
I mean, that's what it feels like. I'm trying to hope that it's not that, but it does feel like very maybe more transparent writing. It feels like now knowing what we know, it's like, okay, we need him for these purposes. We don't need IG-11. We don't have room for IG-11 this season because then we'd have to explain like how would we even transport IG-11? That's the other question. There's no room for him in that pod. He's too tall.
I didn't even think about that, but yeah, that's even more of an issue.
Yeah,
that's the thing. It's just like I feel like in addition to the way that they structure these things, it is like the minor issues that just really stack up in episodes like this.
Yeah. So we go to Mandalore. I love the design of Mandalore. It feels like at the very least in the state that it's in, but it feels like it may have always been like this, at least in the classic sense. Before we were going the more peaceful route on Mandalore, it's a planet for hunters. It's got dangerous layers to it. I love how you kind of go beneath the surface of the planet. It's very cavernous. You got like danger at every turn. You'd have to be a Mandalorian to survive here. That's what it feels like. I think that's kind of cool. And speaking of which, of survivors and just kind of scavengers, we have that nod to General Grievous. It's not General Grievous, but it's kind of a nod to General Grievous. And the enemy that technically we kind of hide behind this lawyer logic here. The enemy that defeats him. So Din Djarin technically loses the Darksaber here, but he doesn't know it yet. Kind of lucks out on that one.
I feel like that was probably the highlight of the episode, is that it kind of came back. That detail came back later.
Yeah, no, you're right. It's nice that he found a way not to have to fight Bo-Katan, which is just it's kind of like a little expo heavy, but I mean, it works. I mean,
Yeah,
it
which I
works, but a
mean,
lot of people, I'm sure, were like, we wanted something more dramatic to happen.
yeah, which I guess also like I feel like what they were also trying to establish with him not fighting, Bo, is that he would probably win.
That is a good
Which
point because he's a really good combatant.
he is, but it's almost a shame because if you would have asked me this back in season 1 or more so even season 2 when they reintroduced her,
Yeah,
in the Star Wars universe, I would have swore she would be able to win. She is an insanely skilled fighter. She was a part of Death Watch, and she had her own little ragtag like elite crew of people. She was the leader of the oh shit, the Night Owls?
yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah, Night Owls. Like she is a very experienced fighter. Uh which I'll also talk about that later when we get to some of her fights later in this season, but I feel like that's kind of what like this episode is they're just like, okay, how do we get rid of this IG storyline we wrote? How do we get him back into his clan, and how do we figure out a way to transfer power later? Boom boom boom.
Right.
That's your writing.
So let's see. So so we have the brutal thing where this grievous-looking creature is like trying to harvest this tissue and bone marrow. It looks like, or something like. It basically, the idea it's done this, and now that we know there are other surviving Mandalorians on that planet, we saw those helmets there. We now know. Oh God, he's been harvesting the bones and the body. God knows what else from these surviving Mandalorians that are on the planet. And Din was on the menu next. Thankfully, Grogu plays the role of Lassie, gets Bo-Katan, and saves his bacon, which is nice. And I tell you, I really love Din Djarin. I already kind of hinted at this. I love their chemistry. I love the Din Djarin and Bo-Katan's chemistry. I love just Bo-Katan hanging around Grogu too. By the way, I don't know. I just like having her in the mix. It's a lot of fun. I love that they have these two different walks of life, walking different paths, and Bo-Katan is again, she's kind of responsible for at least the splintering kind of getting out of hand, or at least having blame on herself there. And so I feel that she needs to be redeemed, which is kind of why Din's there, and that's why like she kind of gets. It's why she's supporting, what he's doing and why he's there. And I mentioned this to Jacob when we got to the episode. I mean, I never want to impose like a relationship or shipping or anything like that. But I mean, if they ever wanted to, which they probably won't, I wouldn't mind seeing these two together because I think this episode like really laid the track that they work together and didn't. I think he's really earned her respect, and like I love that bit where he commends her father for what she's done. He says this is the way. It's like the first time she's actually heard that adage and kind of respected it. I don't know. Just the thought. Regardless, it's kind of nice kind of having them paired together.
All right.
Period. It's cool. And then of
I
course,
mean,
yeah,
it adds a dynamic into the group, which is something that I feel like probably season 2 was missing, because season 1 they did have this group. Like Grogu can't talk; he can only add so much to it, and I feel like Kara was a big part of that in season 1. And then in season 2, we were kind of missing that because he didn't necessarily have this group that he traveled with. And then in season 3, we did see that. It's kind of like it plays very well as a companion. Because I think, like, don't get me wrong, I like Grogu and everything, but with Grogu, he's almost one note, and he's cute. And watch his little hijinks that he gets into. I mean, there's obviously a little bit more, but that's most of what Grogu ends up being.
I mean that's true. We do. There is an episode later where we start to peel back the layers on Grogu, and then by the end of the season, we do kind of add a little. We give Grogu. We do allow some growth on Grogu, which again, given where he's at right now, there's only so much you can do before we add the elements that we add to kind of explore the layers of him, which again aren't many, but there are layers. Let's see. Oh yeah, so I love that we have as Din kind of cleanses his quote unquote sin in the water. We then are introduced to the Mythosaur. The Mythosaur sighting really leaves an impact on Bo-Katan and kind of is like a religious awakening for her, like a sign of sorts. And that brings us to the next episode.
Chapter 19, The Convert.
Yeah, this was directed by Lee Isaac Chung, who he did this, I think, this movie called Minari, and this guy's going to be working on the Skeleton Crew show. I don't know if he's going to be there for. I think he's just going to be probably directing on the Skeleton Crew. I don't know if he's going to be like show running it or anything, but he'll probably be around. So yeah, yeah, this to me, episode 3, I think is a big stand for a lot of people. It might be kind of divisive for some, but I don't know. I think it's a welcome left turn that that you can get away with for 2 reasons. One, it's season 3. One, it's season 3, and we've kind of earned like some leeway to do this sort of stuff. And 2, the extended length of the episode was very well chosen here because we can bookend the story with the things that everyone wants to know about, which is like where we are with the Mando story, and then in the middle we're allowed to do kind of this our big Dr. Pershing story, which is interesting, and we kind of have like this kind of this sandwich that allows us to get everything in. And that was like an extended runtime that was justified and does make you wonder, like, if we extend the runtime on the other episodes, how much more could we have squeezed in? Because this got everything in there that we needed. And I don't want to take away from Casey's earlier point that, yeah, if we did we could have broken up the Pershing stuff. And even as is, we could have revisited the Pershing stuff because we don't know what happened to it at the end of this episode. There was room to maybe revisit the Pershing thing one way or another, either breaking up this story or just revisiting it somewhere else. But yeah, I think I like that we got a full story, and I was impressed that they were really committing to it, but also we weren't shortchanging our core story, which is what, again, Boba Fett was kind of like struggling with.
Yeah, I'm really not a fan of this episode. It's just like feels very, disjointed. It breaks up the flow of not only the season, but even the episode itself, where it's like we just had this like cliffhangery / triumphant moment from the prior episode, and all we really get is that like, oh, okay, Bo-Katan's castle is gone. And now here's another story that you're going to watch for the next 40 minutes that has nothing to do with anything. And at least for season 3 has almost no implications for the future. Almost no implications.
Yeah, that's the thing. You might want to emphasize the almost there because we do a lot of world building here on the New Republic and stuff.
Yeah, you have a lot of world building, but that is, if it's world building on the New Republic, save that for a New Republic show. Save that for something else, because the thing is that it's not very relevant. And it's the same shit with the Book of Boba, is that like, why are you giving the Mandalorian 2 whole episodes? That needs to be a Mandalorian thing. Focus on the Mandalorian stuff with the Mandalorian and focus with Boba on the Boba stuff. Whereas this, if you want to have this as a thing and you want to have what's the girl's name?
You mean Elia Kane.
Elia Kane, yeah, she obviously she's still working for Moff Gideon. That kind of comes back, but it's like it's so minor that like if you were to literally take her out of the show, there'd be almost no change to the overall story.
Well, a few things. I mean, with your point, I think the key difference is that, again, Book of Boba Fett, the real problem there was that was the introduction. That was season 1 of that show, and that was like supposed to be his story, and we interrupted that. This is like, again, season 3. I think we have leeway enough to like, okay, we've told a lot. We've kind of told our core story, and I think that this, compared to what we do later, feels like there's one that's just a complete distraction. This is something that, okay, we're setting up that Gideon has a man on the inside. We're showing where Gideon's likely gotten his cloning stuff from and everything. And I don't know, like we're feeding into the Gideon stuff in the background of the story, but primarily we are doing world building, and we're setting up that the New Republic. We've always said, oh, the New Republic's this, the New Republic's that. We get to see the trouble of the New Republic and possibly a big design flaw in things. And I guess the other thing too is that you are absolutely right about we could have just done a New Republic show. But by the same token, though, they're very fickle about what gets greenlit with the Star Wars stuff. It feels like the stuff that makes sense, it takes forever to get greenlit, and it doesn't. And sometimes we're turning things into movies, we're nixing other things, we're announcing like the Patty Jenkins thing, and I think it's back on, it's not on. It's like we're very fickle about like the blank check that is Star Wars and all these shows that we're getting, especially right now. They're tightening budgets and tightening belts. So I'm glad that we got it in there. And I think just given the fact the episode was long enough, we got at least both things that we were supposed to get enough. I don't know. That's just me. But yeah, go.
No, I'm just like I just the it is a very important, definitely to me, when it comes to any sort of storytelling, whether that be for movies, but especially TV shows, that they have focus. And these shows are lacking focus. And I don't understand why Dave and his team of people did such a great job on Rebels, but now we're just dropping the ball on these live action shows. And I'm not gonna lie, I'll be very disappointed if Ahsoka ends up being, the way of the Mandalorian or the Book of Boba.
Well, I think that show is going to be safe because that's kind of like essentially what all those. I could be wrong, mind you, but it feels like Ahsoka is that's a purely Filoni's baby. That is like pure. That is the big continuation show. And a lot of the stuff that we've done in these offshoots is kind of building towards where that story's going. So that one feels like that's the end of the rainbow. Like that's where it's all been building to, and that's that one. It's like there is really no next for that aside from when they all cross over, but usually by proxy of whatever the Ahsoka story is, which is the continuation of Rebels in that 6 year space.
Yeah.
So I think it's going to be, I think it's going to be safe for that reason. I don't know. Ultimately with the Filoni comparison for me, I think the reason I kind of like this one ultimately, and I think it feels kind of natural towards things, even the way Filoni did the Clone Wars stuff, is if I recall, I mean, you had the offshoot episodes of the Clone Wars, and even of any of the Filoni stuff, you'd have like the offshoot episode, which like we have the we have our core story, and then we take a break and kind of follow something that does feed into like overall is kind of the world itself, which
Well, to be fair, though, Clone Wars did not have a core story. Clone Wars, at its core, was an anthology series.
maybe that's the word I'm looking for. So maybe this have an anthology vibe to you?
Mandalorian, you're referring to?
I mean, the whole like going the Pershing chunk of this episode, did that feel like we kind of shifted gears into an anthology that was kind of developing the world before we went back to our main story? Like, did it feel indicative of kind of that?
No, it didn't feel like anthology at all, and nor does anthology have a place by the time a series has hit its third season.
Hmm.
Even if you were to look at other TV shows that have done something similar to this, it's more effective, or more so shows have more wiggle room, because once again, Mandalorian's only getting 8 episodes. It's not getting 18 to 22 episodes in a season. If we had 18 to like 22 episodes in a season, hell, if we even had like 16 episodes like the Bad Batch does, it's a little bit different to give almost the entirety of an episode to Dr. Pershing and Elia Kane.
So, based on the limited number of episodes, we probably should have. You're saying probably should have tightened the focus on this one specifically.
I mean, well, more so because we are limited, you need to break this up. You need to include Dr. Pershing as a B story in other episodes. And like I had said for episode 1, the parallel of like two people who were once a part of this culture and no longer like technically really invited, like that would have been a great parallel. You would have had to slightly write Dr. Pershing to be a little bit different to really hit home on that parallel. But yeah, that's the issue. And it's the same shit with season 1 and season 2 of The Mandalorian, is that like you can't just go off and do these like crazy one-off episodes. When you have a shorter form show, you need to carry to plot point A to plot point B, plot point Z. You can't go from A to B to B2, then to C,
Right. No, that's actually a really good point. Okay, let's see. So wrapping. Okay, so getting to like the big thing we do at the end of the episode though. So Mando and Bo-Katan, they are redeemed thanks to the water sample. We have our big status quo shift for Bo-Katan, where she's walking the way of the Mandalore essentially in the old ways, and that she's. Yeah, so she's kind of back to square one in a sense. She's kind of going through like the thing that she I mean, again, I could have sworn like she kind of forsaked her sister for the bare minimum. She's walking away that she kind of scoffed at before the bare minimum. So she's kind of going back to kind of like the seemingly primitive ways that she initially scoffed at. That's kind of where we're going for the next episode. Bringing us to 4, The Foundling. So yeah, this was directed by Carl Weathers. Yeah, we had him direct last episode. He did the Grief Karga episode last season, where we had the famous cookie episode, the macaroons.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I really honestly a lot of people have kind of heralded this one as one of the big standout episodes of the season. I'm hard pressed to disagree. I really I do think it's a standout episode. Like I loved exploring the old kind of the Death Watch, Splinter Death Watch, kind of like I don't know if we really have a name for our factions of Mandos. Makes it we have the helmets and the non-helmets. It's
Yeah.
the
Because I think
Children of
that's
the Watch. I think technically is the name.
yeah, because these people aren't Death Watch, which I
Yeah,
think they do a number of times throughout the 3 seasons. They have small lines that say we are not like Death Watch,
yeah.
but then
We've
they're
only
like
seen
referred
Death
to
Watch.
as a cult, you know?
Yeah, like we saw Death Watch briefly in the last episode of the first season when Din had his flashback to like him being saved by the Mandalorians. The Death Watch.
Yeah.
Mandalorians. But yeah, so the Children of the Point being, we see the old school kind of like Children of the Watch sort of beliefs and the hunting traditions as they kind of like they hunt together to save one of their own, and we have like a little cute bit with Grogu versus Ragnar, and basically something I feel at Galaxy's Edge or something they should institute is like that little Jedi demonstration outside Star Tours where it's like, here you go, put on your helmet and fire those little paintball darts at each other.
Oh yeah, kids would love that.
Yeah, it's adorable. Plus, I love how it's wrist mounted. That's my favorite part.
Yeah, we're seeing Ragnar and Grogu go out and basically have this duel, and having Grogu win. That was just such a highlight.
Also, so learning, I love the idea. Casey, I want to get your take on this. So, I love the idea Ragnar is Vizsla's son. Is Paz Vizsla's son. Of course, I love the whole lineage of Vizslas, and I love how we added so many layers to this guy. Ultimately, not like we don't get to know the guy a whole lot, but I like that what we see is he was he fought for the dark saber because it ran in his family for a long time, and this guy is kind of he's kind of on a redemptive path ultimately in a kind of more subtle sense, and by the end of things, he does a big, awesome sacrificial thing. So we've shown this guy has shades of gray. Where he's not a bad guy, but he was antagonistic, and he softens in this episode after really learning to trust Bo-Katan and everything. But we have the lineage factor with Ragnar. Now, do you think Ragnar is like an adopted son, like Grogu ultimately will be, because he too is a foundling, or do you think he is, or do you think he's like the actual biological son?
To be honest, I think he's an actual biological son. I mean, I'm sure. Yeah, I'm sure the Vizslas. There's plenty of them, so I don't know, but we've seen that there are a number. We've seen even later in the series that you can adopt and you can introduce people that way. We've seen that plenty of times. But yeah, I just always assumed that it was his biological son.
Yeah, I mean, that was my assumption. Then you think of the episode title and you kind of reconsider, like, well, I mean, maybe he is like a foundling, and just given where we go with Grogu, I mean, it stands to reason. But you're right, we don't know. But I'm honestly I'm erring on your side, but I think it probably is biological, given like the Vizsla kind of bloodline. So probably.
Plus, I feel like given Paz's the end of his arc by this season, I feel like if he was, adopted or something, it's probably something that would have been brought up. But
Yeah.
I also have no clue how these people have kids if they
Well, that's the thing. I was about to bring that up. So it's twofold. Okay, one, you could either look at it as like, okay, because they don't like surrender themselves in that way, he would have to be a foundling because the Mandos don't have kids, but they adopt kids as per their creed. Flip side of that, though, well, it won't be the most cuddly way, but I mean, they could reproduce, just they would not be able to take the helmets off. All right, we're gonna move on from there. So, Let's talk. Okay, so while we're doing the search party, save Ragnar, Grogu is left with the armor, and we get the big flashback with the Ahmed Best his own redemption as the Keller and Beck. Casey, how
Mhm.
do you feel about Keller and Beck?
I was very surprised they brought Kelleran into the show. I feel like you guys had to have probably talked about it when you did your original recap for the Foundling. But for anyone who doesn't know, Kelleran Beck was the host of essentially a kids' reality competition that was Star Wars themed, and the actor who played him was also the guy who played Jar Jar Binks in the or in the prequel series. So very interesting, kind of caught me off guard, but it was kind of cool in like an Easter eggy kind of way.
Let me ask you
Um,
this: so you're saying on the original game show it was still Ahmed Best who was casting for this in reference to that guy?
Wait, I'm sorry, what's that?
Was okay. So this thing I see when I heard about the game show thing. I thought it was something a little different, and then Tiki corrected me. But what we didn't say is that so was Ahmed Best in this game show you're talking about?
Yeah, yeah, he was the host. It's
So he was
called.
there's literally one for one. Then they literally brought him in because of that.
I think, yeah, I think so.
That's cool. I
Now,
did not know that layer to it. That's really cool.
yeah, it's called Jedi Temple Challenge.
Yeah, yeah.
It came out during the probably actually during lockdown. Um or right around the time that we were all locked down. Um I don't think it did any more than one season. But yeah, he played Kelleran Beck, who was the host. He had a little droid companion as well. I don't remember what the droid companion's name was. Um but yeah, it's just very interesting. They decided to officially canonically make him a character by adding him into the Mandalorian. And it's kind of interesting. I feel like Ahmed Best has gotten a sort of a sense of redemption. Even though I feel like the actor himself has nothing to redeem.
Yeah, I mean, yeah,
Uh,
he did. That's a thing. Over the years, Ahmed Best, it's so lovely to see. I think he had like a posting on some anniversary where he was getting really low in life, and he kind of contemplated ending it because of the backlash, and he kind of opted not to. And over the years, fans have shown him some love, and like for example, like, he won an Annie for his performance of Jar Jar Binks in a comedic sense from Robot Chicken. And yeah, so this is kind of like a cool thing. Like if we're gonna read, it feels like they Filoni's always been on a crusade to redeem the prequels. In a sense, he's always been like the guy. He's been sticking for the little guy. If you ever watch like the Disney Gallery on the first season of Mando, one of the episodes, I can't remember which one, Filoni lays out his why the prequels are great, kind of like the big full circle, like how everything connects, between the two trilogies. Um, and yeah, so looking at that, it feels like okay, if we're gonna bring in Ahmed Best, if we're gonna bring him in, we're gonna bring him as a Jedi that does something really important, saves him one of the most beloved characters from the show.
Yeah, and I like that they do that. I hope this man is in a much better place now too.
Yeah, yeah, that's the thing. Yeah, he's I think he had a son too, so it was like a nice posting of like like life went on. He did really good things, and now we're kind of rewarding that within the fandom that initially spurned him. So that's really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which, as we all know, the Star Wars fan base can be insanely toxic.
Yeah, yeah, it's not as simple as it once was. Where like the
Mhm.
thing that would like you kind of like across the board like unify someone has now been a lot more quibbly than usual. Where it's like, hey, it's there was a time where okay, like half the people don't like the Ewoks, no one likes Jar Jar Binks, and now we've kind of come around on things like no, we have other more quibbly, smaller, more insignificant battles to fight on. We're gonna throw out terms that are really silly or all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, it's just weird. I feel like every generation they're doing something to kind of fix the old stuff. We do have a number of these companion shows that emphasize and expand and make better the prequels, whereas clearly, at least in my mind, I feel like it's pretty clear that the Mandoverse is, and even the Bad Batch, those shows are created to help expand and lift up the sequel trilogy, especially as you can see a heavy theme is the cloning that has to do with in episode 9.
Yeah.
But anyway,
Yeah.
I feel like we got on a little bit of a tangent
Yes.
there. But yeah, with the foundling, going back to your original statement when we first started talking about this episode, I feel like the temple rescue was a really cool segment, and I very much appreciated that aspect. And you know what? Overall, I feel like this episode was actually among one of the more boring episodes, but it was part of character building, and really, I feel like it was building Bo's character. As she gets her new pauldron, I think at the end of the episodes when she gets it.
Yeah, she does. She gets it when she gets the mythosaur.
Yeah. And so she, sports the mythosaur with her night owl sigil on one on each shoulder. But yeah, it's a lot of like Bo-Katan building. But the thing is that I feel like while this makes for an interesting enough like character build episodic, I feel like Bo's arc in this season happens a little bit like too fast. Because I feel like it's just like, oh, well, here's Bo again, and she's going to help the Mando out, and now we're going to take her arc and go 0 to 100 in just a couple episodes. But ultimately, I'm fine with this episode, I guess. I did not think it was the most entertaining episode, as they were really just, saving Ragnar from a giant bird.
Yeah. Oh man, again for me, the Bo-Katan stuff. I like how we developed Vizsla, and honestly, just on a cool factor. I love seeing. I'm a sucker for when we have characters doing heroic and then saving other characters. I love it when Din saved that kid when he was plummeting from the giant bird nest. Anyway, yeah. So that brings up episode 5.
21, The Pirate.
Yeah, this was directed by. This is honestly the director I was most excited to see this season, Peter Ramsey. Peter Ramsey, he did Rise of the Guardians and the first Spider-Verse movie.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, he's not coming back for the sequel. They got Joaquin DeSantis and I believe some other directors on that. But this guy's great. Peter Ramsey's really good. So he did this one. I don't know if it's the first live action thing he's directed or not because he usually does animation. So yeah, this the Mandalorians return to Navarro to save Karga's bacon, essentially, which is fun and kind of full circle. Again, assuming this is maybe a closing of the loop here because of the fight against Karga and his bounty hunters to escape, and they had to uproot their original covert that was on Navarro. Yeah. So it's kind of a nice little payoff there, in which we go there, and then we start to pay off the New Republic stuff. With we have Carson Teva, the New Republic pilot who's going around. He's basically dealing with the bureaucracy, and it's not going well. Good old Tim Meadows. I love that Tim Meadows is in this episode. By the way, we got Tim Meadows as Colonel Tuttle being misled. And it's basically hands are tied. They can't help. And thanks to R5, we found a way of reaching out to Mando, and we have a rallying speech, and we all go back to Navarro. But Jacob, who's our guest star this episode?
Who is the guest star this episode, Dragon?
Well, it's a Rebels alumni, Jacob.
Oh yes, Zeb.
Yeah, we got Zeb. Casey, how do you feel about Zeb popping up here?
The second I heard the voice, I freaked.
Right?
I loved it.
They got Steve Blum to return to do the voice.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Oh, it was so amazing because I think Rebels, aside from Andor, Rebels is like one of the best Star Wars shows that's come out. It is really incredibly well done, continues to expand upon the old and the new-ish. And it has a very like Avatar-esque feel to it, where it starts off lighthearted and goes, very dramatic. But the Rebels thing aside, I was so excited just to see him for like 2 freaking seconds. I will say it was a tad bit weird to see a live action version of him, because obviously he's not just a humanoid, so to speak. Like you can't just like paint him to be something different. So it was a lot of cosmetics, but I very much enjoyed seeing him in this episode. This
Yeah.
episode in general, I thought was like a fun enough episode, and it was cool seeing the people come together.
Yeah, yeah. And also, I mean, looking back on it, this is kind of like a warm up for the finale. The Mando's kind of like in action at a group setting, going up against kind of an oppositional force. And again, one of the things I always love with Mando that we see is that we have something that's made our dogfights and our stuff involving spaceships and everything work really well. Is that we don't go overblown like we have in Star Wars. It's not like the Rise of Skywalker thing. Where like there's all the spaceships, like a whole line of them. It's kind of our weak little kind of our weak backhanded way of like this is our end game moment. It's not quite that. This is usually like season one we end with like one single TIE fighter, but it's like man versus TIE fighter, and we have like we're going to like a canyon with like a few of them, but again it's very grounded. And here it's like, okay, we only have two ships to take on this giant like this giant star destroyer sized like the pirate ship. So I mean that's what I'm saying. I like how we keep it really, really kind of practical and realistic in terms of like what the challenge is, so it feels like more achievable. If that makes any sense. Versus like
Yeah.
it's just like a bazillion like kind of like no names just going around.
Yeah, you don't have to suspend your disbelief as much.
Yeah, it's like okay, so realistically, the Mandalorians they only have like two ships. That's all they have to do the job because Din came in on something and so did she. The Mandalorians don't even have ships really. Only Bo-Katan. They only what they have, what they've taken from either the Empire or what Mando's gotten from Pele.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which does make me think, how the hell did they relocate after season one? But that's a different
I
story.
mean, they have jetpacks. The question of like, how do they? They probably have to like hop rides or something like a steam, like kind of a equivalent to like a steamer or something in space. Or even, it'd be funny. Here's a funny way in which they do it. We do that awesome thing that we did in the Book of Boba Fett episode where Mando has to take like a transport, which is essentially the equivalent to like a bus or something, like a train. So you all have to like unload their weapons. They're all pissed off about it. And they all have to like
Yeah.
just feel like the most annoyed like passengers on that thing.
I mean, yeah. Which the only thing about that is that group is definitely like they prefer to stay in hiding. But
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing. Maybe they had to do something with that. And honestly, I don't think we'll ever necessarily get an
Yeah.
answer for it. But I think this episode though with the pirate, and this is like I personally, like I said, I still do like The Mandalorian. The season was entertaining enough. But I feel like, they could have easily restructured and rewrote this season for the 8 episodes that it had. This would have actually been, and hear me out on this episode would have actually made for a pretty good finale where it's like this whole season of pirates they're the big bad of the season, and the Mandalorians take them on and take them out, and then by the end of the season they make Navarro their new home, while like a B story, or more so even like a C story for the entirety of the season, would have been like Moff Gideon's forces in the background building to a really big climactic 4th season. But I feel like this episode, with some tweaks and some adjustments, this could have been a great finale.
It could have been. Yeah, and of course, there's no Hondo in it.
No, but let's hope we get him for Ahsoka.
I mean, when I saw the pirate, I was like, "Are we getting the pirate?" No, it turns out to be the other pirate, the one that was featured earlier in the show. But as you mentioned, yeah, hopefully we get him in Ahsoka.
Yep. And we end the episode on the big helmet move. Bo-Katan is allowed to walk both ways and is allowed to take off her helmets and we're retaking Mandalore. Also, we got a nice piece of real estate on Navarro. Way to go, Karga. Nice. He's a nice host, and he's made up for all for shooting at him. Way back. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Also, it was a nice moment too. Real quick, I loved how we won over how that last episode fed into winning over Paz Vizsla. here. I've always really liked that. Just I was like, you think, oh god, they're gonna have to do this on their own, and Vizsla's gonna like turn the crowd against them or something like that. I was like, no, they helped save my kid, and I like these two. We're gonna do this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which it was like, Paz has been getting these very subtle characterizations,
Yeah.
and which is fine. I wish we would have actually gotten more of Paz. But this is also what I was referring to earlier too, is like when you actually look at Bo's arc for this season, more or less she goes from being alone and depressed, and then within about 4 episodes, she somehow like rose herself to like the top spot in this cult where she's going to bring all of Mandalore back together. It just feels really fast.
All right, so that brings us to episode 6,
Chapter 22, Guns for Hire.
This was directed by Bryce Dallas Howard. Now, ordinarily, Bryce, she did the big Bo-Katan introduction a while back.
The Heiress.
The Heiress, yes, and of course, I love her directing style. And I got to be honest, Bryce Dallas Howard, I could see like getting a Star Wars movie. I think she's that good a director. I think this episode, however, was not her finest work.
No,
not in terms of direction, but in terms of story content, what we're working with here. This is possibly the weakest episode of Mandalorian. Not bad, but definitely, I think to me, of all the episodes in the series, at the bare minimum this season, I think this one for me disrupts the flow most of the track that we built in the season. This is the one narratively I think throws things off and I think compromises the season. Again, not to say each season doesn't have at least one episode that kind of does the same thing. This one's like the most like in your face apparent that we're like we had this big we're retaking Mandalore. Let's find those Mandos and go on home. But we have an episode to fill, so we got to do this first. It's very video game side questy. I mean, I'm not even just saying that in terms of like, I'm not trying to split hairs. It's like literally, we enter like a little pod that's got like a little monorail pod that's going to take us to the Mandos, and the plot says like, oh no, we got to take you here first. It's like, wait, what? Take the Plaisir 15. I like broad spectrum and feeding into the Pershing of it all here. I like how this we're seeing like a hedonistic kind of post-war paradise. The idea that it's kind of the political commentary we've been making through Star Wars. It seems like between this and Andor and everything else is that the rich get richer in Star Wars. Like they're either between war profiteers, just the rich who are just like not bothered by any of this, and there's like they're lazy and kind of defenseless, without their droids. Like they're very reliant on droids and everything, and there's very soft, kind of soft and cocky it seems. So that's kind of the main takeaway here, is I feel in the episode. So I mean, I like our droid plot, but it's just really weird in that we're doing a procedural cop story in this episode. Now, I love procedural cop stories. And again, based even like going to Clone Wars and all sorts of other stuff, we do play with genre in Star Wars. It's kind of what George Lucas' whole thing is. He wants to look at Indiana Jones, throw back the serials, as is Star Wars as well. It's like, we're going old school with things. We're kind of playing with the genres and the types of stories you tell. So I don't mind doing a procedural cop story, but this one feeds into exactly what Casey's talking about earlier, in which like this is real estate and time we don't have to lose here. Where this is nice, but as much as I love seeing Din Djarin play bad cop and kick around battle droids, like pulling like an iRobot and doing like an iRobot chase, I love all that.
Yes, that is exactly what I was thinking when I was watching the episode.
I mean, as much as I love seeing them do, Casey, I'm not even exaggerating. I love just the physics of the practical physics of. Even though we kind of had to write out the jetpack for reasons, I just like the fact that he has to run around with all that armor, and he looks like he's running around in a bunch of armor when he's chasing that thing, and I love that.
But yeah, this episode, I mean, I also agree with that too. Like, it did feel very side questy. It's like there were like probably like 8 minutes, and that might be generous to say that, like 8 minutes of actual like progressive story like happening, moving to the next plot point, because it's just this really weird episode. But I was definitely thinking a lot of iRobot when I was watching this episode. But I think one of the biggest issues with this episode is the amount of like, big name actors or big name people that we got in this episode. It really took me out. And it was just like goofy. Sometimes you do world building and it's not just in Star Wars, but in other, sci-fi and or fantasy elements. You do something because you want it to stand out and give it like a sense of like individuality. But in this, it looks goofy as hell.
Well, I mean, goofiness has been a part of Star Wars from the very beginning, but I guess I do see where you're coming from. This one kind of did amp it up to kind of a degree.
Well, I feel like there's a difference between something being campy versus something just being like downright goofy. And yeah, Star Wars always had like an element of campiness to it, which is fine. I love campy shit. I love campy horror films, especially. But no, this was just goofy. And I have nothing against Lizzo. I actually like some of her music, but she's not a good actress. And that definitely takes you out of it too.
I mean, here's the thing. So the episode, and we brought this up when we did the original thing, Casey, because when this came out, it was literally like the day of the Mario movie. So it feels very intentionally timed.
I mean, it was probably not intentionally timed, but
I mean, Jacob, I know. Ultimately, I do think it is just coincidence. But if you think about it, I don't know that. If it stands to reason they could have known the release date of things, and but you're right though. In terms of the order of events, it would have had to just be at this place in the episode. There's no way they could have actually occurred for it, but like accounted for. But I don't know. It just feels like really suspicious or like a ridiculous coincidence. Anyway.
Well, I wouldn't doubt it if they chose Jack Black due to his role in Mario. But as for it coming out like on the same day, that I actually did not put two and two together on.
Yeah.
That feels like it's a coincidence because they're separate companies. But I wouldn't doubt it if like, Star Wars was like, okay, we'll throw Jack Black in here and hopefully someone will look up his like IMDb credits and be like, oh, he's in The Mandalorian. Let me watch The Mandalorian now.
So the stunt casting in this episode, it's distracting. It's not bad, but it's very distracting. You get like Jack Black and Lizzo. It's like they're not ill cast, and honestly, with Lizzo, it's a harmless thing in terms of like Lizzo. You can tell. I mean, it's not. We don't know for sure, but you can tell. It's like she probably wrote into her contract. Whatever happens, I want to be in Mandalorian for one reason only. I want to hold the baby, and she got to hold the baby. That's she did it.
Yeah.
But that's what it feels like. That's very transparent on the screen. She just wanted to hold the baby and play with the baby, and she got her wish. I mean, is it the worst thing in the world? No, just let her have fun with a little baby. It's but still, it's like in an episode where we're really building a lot of track here, and it's like, hey, we got it's like hand go off to someone, and of all the stunt casting we do have, like Christopher Lloyd, okay, that's natural for Star Wars. That's good. Only unfortunately, we gave him a bit part. We tased him right as he said the interesting stuff. It's like, hey, he's just mentioned Count Dooku, and then we tase him.
Yeah.
Dang it.
Like they really should have used Christopher Lloyd more. It's like, you guys have like one of the most iconic 80s sci-fi actors of all time, and you just have him sitting in a chair.
Then we ran 1.21 gigawatts through him.
To be fair, though, he's getting up there in age.
I know, but he can still do more than just sit.
He was like killing a bunch of Russians with shotguns recently. So I mean, he's getting up there, but he's still pretty active.
Wait, what movie is this?
Nobody. The movie Nobody.
Oh, that was a couple years ago, though, wasn't it?
I mean, no, they held off. Well, let's see. They came out. I forget if it came out. They held it off for. I think it was made in 2020. It came out in 2021. So I mean, it's not that far.
Yep, came out in 2021.
So maybe look, 2 to 3 years max, but still 2 years.
I mean, hell, three years can be a lot when you're in your 80s.
All right, fair. Okay.
What I mean though is like they could have had him do more than just sit in a chair for a few scenes and just say that he's like a supporter of Dooku and then get tased.
I mean, honestly, I'm not saying he has to run around or anything. I'm just saying let him say more. Like let him get through the rest of the Dooku line before we tase him.
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying is like let him say some stuff. Like maybe at least let him be the guy in charge. Maybe that'd be like instead of like the couple, maybe like he's like running like Plaisir 15, and then like you give them like an emotional journey of like, I trust these droids, and they're like, oh god, no, what's happened? I don't know. Okay, let's see. So again, I already mentioned the procedural cop thing. I mean, the big thing I like most about this, I love seeing Din Djarin's kind of hatred for battle droids after how they killed his parents. So kind of like that's all, that's all great, and him kind of getting over his prejudice and kind of having some sympathy for the droids, at least at the very least a tolerance for them. And the best part of the episode was the Ugnaughts, where the whole I've spoken callback, and again, kind of it feels like a closing the loop sort of thing.
It is very interesting to see the Ugnaughts just in general in The Mandalorian, because if you're familiar with how the Ugnaughts actually act in other Star Wars properties, they come off very goofy and like almost whimsical.
Mhm.
But they're much more serious and like unique in the live action universe. But it was cool to get that callback. I did appreciate that. And we had a couple callbacks from season 1 throughout season 3.
Yeah. Still think one of the great Ugnaught jokes in Star Wars related media was I think they used it in Robot Chicken Star Wars. I can't remember which special. It was the first or second one. You had an Ugnaught, the Ugnaught who drops C-3PO's head. The idea is like, what if what if it was thrown like a football and he's about to catch it, and he then has he has like a nightmare flashback to his days in like at high school during the big football game in which he catches the ball but then it drops out of his hand, and same thing repeats to C-3PO. And yeah, it's funny. Anyway. So, yeah, and also we had the big Bo-Katan fight. So you wanted to talk about Bo-Katan's combat skills or something? Like she's going up against Axe Wolves.
Yeah. So, was it just me, or was that a little bit of a letdown? Like they're both very capable. I mean, oh yeah, of course she held her own, but it's just like everything in terms of action sequences, like that should have been one of them that they really sunk their stunt coordinators into, is creating like a really good action sequence between her and Axe, and just like show you why she's the leader. Because Mandalorians, they respect the fight.
I mean, Casey, I hear your point, but you know what it feels like to me? It feels like this fight scene feels like an unfortunate casualty of just where it's placed, because we have the more important fight to show off Bo-Katan with her versus Moff Gideon. And that's the one we really need to show her prowess on. This one's just more of like, it's kind of a stop along the way based on how the episode has played out to this point. We're not spending a lot of time building up to this. It's like, okay, and we're finally there. It's like we built up to it, but more so in like, this is where we're going, versus like, okay, we're gonna earn that place there. We're getting there. Like she's working up her confidence. She's getting ready to fight this guy or something. Or something more direct. Like we barely established Axe Wolves. Axe Wolves like, wait, oh, you remember that one guy way back? Well, here he is again. Let's fight him. That's the unfortunate thing, right? I don't think you're wrong in terms of like we could have built this up, and you're right. They would respect them seeing this fight would have had an impact, but I don't think there was room for it based on how this episode was structured.
Yeah, but
I mean, still, what we do have, it's like, oh man, Bo-Katan took that guy out rather quickly, and again, she's rather skilled to do that, and she could have killed him. Then she pretty much won the yield, and he essentially did. So
yeah.
See, that's the thing. If she ever fought Din Djarin's a man of honor. He would not. He wouldn't yield in a fight. He would yield. We saw he just instantly yielded the Darksaber to her way back. Like, okay, I yield. You can have the Darksaber, but apparently it doesn't work like that. And then we have like a little legal loophole to do that here, which some people are upset about. But yeah, I mean, look, we already used the fight. We can't just do it like we just can't like. Okay, she just fought this guy. Now she's got to fight Din Djarin. This would not have worked. I think the better version of this episode, not saying we should have done this, but if you wanted to do a big fight scene for the Darksaber between Mandos, you probably would have had Axe Wolves get in her head and basically guilt her into the fight with Din Djarin. And have that be the big build-up.
I mean, I'm fine with her not fighting Din, and we kind of talked about this.
Yeah, saying we don't need it. But I'm saying if you want a big fight, that's probably the only way you'd probably get that done right. But you're right, we don't need that. We didn't do that.
And the loophole makes complete sense.
It
somebody bested Din, and then she bested that guy.
Yeah.
Which I guess, technically speaking, I guess the Darksaber in a way would have gone to him.
Yes.
And then, so like, yeah, that all makes sense. I just think that like the fight felt sloppy. And
That's the thing.
who
It
knows?
feels like a last minute sort of thing, like an afterthought is the problem.
Yeah, and it could also just be like maybe they were adding or trying to add a touch of realism, but also at the same time, like these are very highly trained soldiers.
True. Okay, so let's transition to episode 7.
Episode 7, Chapter 23, The Spies.
Yeah, so the next 2 episodes are both directed by Rick Famuyiwa, who did The Child, very famously the big Hook episode of Mandalorian way back, and we kind of bring him in occasionally. The point of Famuyiwa is like a big gun sort of thing. I think he produces the show too at this juncture. So, yeah, I love this episode. This one, I think, if I had to objectively, I think Seven's probably the big one. I think 7 might be the standout of this season. It's a good episode. We have the big Moff Gideon return. I think we have a balance of a lot of things that we honestly this episode kind of has a balance of everything I think we were looking for from the season. I think it's kind of the representation of everything season 3 could have been, debatably. Like we basically we answer between this episode and next episode, we answer all the Moff Gideon stuff we need, at least all the important Moff Gideon stuff that we need. Like we get all of our world building with the Imperial remnants here. We have like the Shadow Collective of Imperial warlords, and we see what they've been up to, and we kind of foreshadow the First Order, at least in its building blocks. And we have Hux, man. We get Commandant Hux. We got Hux's daddy is in this episode.
Which was played by, I believe, the guy's brother.
Yeah. That's the thing. They got another Gleason. Like I think Brendan.
Yeah.
I think Tiki told me Brendan Gleason is Donald Gleason's father in real life.
Yep.
Yeah. Which I had no idea. I thought it was like a coincidence. But yeah. So the fact is, we got Gleasons in here, man.
Which is really cool. Like I feel like this episode feels very similar, and I'm blanking a little bit on season 2, but definitely in season 1, how like season 1 almost pretty much had a 2-part finale.
Yeah,
and that's very much what this felt like. But and I know I keep coming back to it, but like as I was even saying earlier, whereas you had the episode of the pirate, which also we did forget to make mention that Vane left the pirates, so he's out there still alive. But while the pirate would have made a great finale for season 3, I think actually this would have made a good like penultimate episode to the series if season 4 was going to be like the final season, because it was like it ended on like a pretty big cliffhanger.
You're not wrong about that. Yeah, if you did end the season on this, everyone and their mother would come back for the next season.
Yeah, and it was a very interesting episode. I enjoyed these last 2 episodes, but with this episode, we finally got to see that there are other people, and we got to see the Mythosaur come out of the surface of the planet.
No, I don't believe that was the Mythosaur. I think it's another creature.
Oh no, you're right. Because then we end up seeing the Mythosaur.
Yeah, they would have had a much bigger reaction if that was like the actual Mythosaur. Like, oh my god!
I guess to be fair though, that creature is ginormous, like the Mythosaur, and like what the hell is that? Like, yeah. I'm actually, I don't now. I'm kind of curious what that creature is.
I mean, you're not wrong. We don't really spend time saying what it is, but yeah, it's
yeah. But it was interesting, and we even got that little garden moment, which was a little weird. They like went into hiding only to literally come back out of hiding for like 2 seconds. But they gave you that world building on Mandalore, which in my mind, this whole show is about Mandalorians and about Mandalorian culture.
Yeah.
And, having world building moments like that, to me, is a lot better than seeing, even though it was very beautiful, like something like Coruscant in episode 3.
Yeah. Yeah, so you're right. We do have some Mandalorian culture clash. I love the fact that we have, especially before we kill them, too. It's kind of nice to give them like a little moment of levity. This Vizsla getting ticked off over like a game of space chess with axe wolves. And Axel's had that beating coming, by the way. Like, calling him primitive was mean. You know, he deserved that.
He did.
But then, of course, Grogu breaking up in his new IG-11. This is probably the cutest idea of the whole season. The fact that we turned IG-11 into a mech for Baby Yoda. I mean, I love the ethical question here, though. Like, are we like dishonoring IG-11's body at this point? We've turned him into a car.
No.
Okay. But yeah, so we have shenanigans at the marketplace, which I love. I love like the father-son moments between Grogu and Din Djarin. And he was like, "No, stop it!" And he's chasing him around the room. It's adorable. Let's see. Okay, so the big just jump around a little bit. So Moff Gideon's ultimate screw you to Mandalore. So I love all the world building we get around the campfire, and we see how it kind of pays off here. So I was very satisfied with everything we kind of learned about Gideon, in which he apparently he offered like a mercy to Bo-Katan, like surrender now, and give me the Darksaber and surrender, and I'll spare the planet. Of course, he blew everyone up. Just prick. And that puts a lot of pressure on the Bo-Katan over like that's the main guilt that she has. I'm sure she feels bad about maybe like how things happen leading to her sister's death. But let's just say the primary thing is about how she kind of surrendered the Darksaber. That's the big thing that she's trying to redeem herself for. Anyway, so then started the thing that we revealed about Moff Gideon. So basically, he loves. The best way I can summarize is Moff Gideon loves Darth Maul because of the Renaissance man that he was. Like Gideon, he's basically appropriated the cultures from the best of Star Wars. The cloners, the Jedi, the Mandalorians, and a little bit of droid because there's kind of like a mechanized component to his armor if you listen. So there's a little bit of like the dark troopers, and we have like Beskar dark troopers too. So
yeah, it was essentially he was wearing a Beskar like exosuit.
Yeah, which is awesome. I mean, me being the gadget nut that I am, I love Gideon's style. One, I love Giancarlo Esposito already. I miss the mustache, but I love Esposito. And he's looking great. I love his helmet is like in tribute to Darth Maul, and that's what I'm saying. I like to think that he's been envious of Maul this whole time, and because he did all these things. He was a Sith, which is an equivalent to a Jedi. He came back from death, being cut in half. He ruled Mandalore because he had the Darksaber for a bit. And Gideon's been chasing this sort of thing. I love all that. I love that idea with him. It gives him a lot of purpose. Now, what do you think, Casey? You like that? How you feeling the Gideon stuff overall? And did you like it?
I mean, yeah, overall, I really like Gideon as essentially and hopefully the series antagonist.
Yeah.
I think he's a lot of fun. He's very calculating. I for the most part, I very much do like villains like this, and I think the parallel too would be something like Thrawn as well in Rebels. Thrawn is a great villain.
And we name dropped him in this episode. They're building to Thrawn's return in Ahsoka here. We kind of say, like, where is he? Where's Thrawn? I'm going to take a spot if he's not here.
Well, this is like the second time they had name dropped Thrawn in here.
Well, you're right. We did it in the Ahsoka episode. Did we drop him then, too?
Yeah.
Yep, she explicitly mentioned the name Thrawn.
There you go.
Well, yeah, when she fought off against the one woman in season 2. Where is he? Blah blah blah.
But no, yeah, I mean, born in Austria now.
Yeah, like this episode in the beginning had a lot of references and a lot of setup and a lot of enhancing on the sequel trilogy. It was a lot of information in such a short amount of time. I mean, one key piece is the Praetorian Guards as well, which it didn't click in my mind that's who that was. I forgot that was their names until they were shown at the end of the episode, and I was like,
I always nicknamed them the Crayolas, but yeah, that's them.
Wait, what's that?
I nickname them the Crayolas. It's like a robot chicken gag. I keep calling them the Crayolas, but yeah, You're right. The Praetorian Guards, the Imperial Guards that have always been like the red guys in the throne room with the Emperor. So the bodyguards, and we see how menacing they really are when put into action when they get into their fight with Paz Vizsla.
Yeah, which I mean, he does his best to to hold his ground. But yeah, I mean, that's the thing. I liked a lot of those little things. I really do like Moff Gideon. I think he is a good villain, and he's perfect for this episode, especially in the way that he's even originally introduced in the series. It's something where he as a character was instrumental in the downfall of Mandalore. So I love to see him, and I love to see him be reintroduced, after 6 episodes of not seeing him. Finally to get that reveal in episode 7 was a lot of fun.
Yeah. So let's see. I guess that brings us to just the finale. Then I guess we just transition to, again, we killed off Paz Vizsla very memorably, and it's a low of lows, and that brings us to the return.
Chapter 24.
Yeah, I really like this finale. It was a lot of fun. Yeah, maybe not a lot really happened in the way of like the plot itself, but it was a lot of fighting, and it was a lot of fun, and it was really cool. All of the action sequences with the Mandalorian fighting in the underground system, with their jetpacks, and Bo with the dark saber and everything like that. That almost reminded me of an episode out of Clone Wars. Like, it was so cool to see all of that. I think the only even one small negative that I even had from this episode was the fact that Grogu was really exerting himself and did not like faint from his powers, as we've seen him do plenty of times. Even recently, we saw him do that at the end of the Book of Boba.
Yeah.
He really exerted himself, and it was just like, that kind of felt like a big jump. But other than that, I mean, that's such a nitpicky thing. It was just a lot of fun. Like,
He's getting stronger. He's getting more powerful.
100%, 100%, and I don't disagree, but it just felt like a little bit of a jump. But like I said, that's just me being picky. This by far was probably my favorite episode of season 3.
I mean, this probably is the best episode of season 3. I mean, it has it's kind of light on dialogue, as you pretty much said, but what it lacks in dialogue, it definitely makes up for in memorable set pieces.
Yeah. I also thought it was a little weird too how there was this big battle to fight leading into Moff Gideon's like command center, but then literally like if you just went out the back door to his command center, it literally like led to the hangar bay.
Yeah.
It seemed goofy.
I mean, I do love the idea that he built his base in Mandalore to strip it of its resources and everything. So, like, I love the whole, like, the base being in Mandalore idea.
Oh, me too. I think that was a great idea, especially given that everyone thought that it was uninhabitable.
Yeah.
But you have the remnants who like, no, it's definitely inhabitable, because like that's not a base that you just build and get it done so shortly. Like, that base has been there.
Mm-hmm. So let's see. Few things. I mean, another season 1 callback to the finale. Even I love that Grogu saves Din Djarin after he was captured, and I was so terrified they were going to remove his helmet. By the way, and I'm so glad they didn't. And I love after Grogu saves him, his little back to spray thing, which is nice. I mean, I mentioned this before. The whole finale to me has kind of like a tone of like a proper mixture of A New Hope and Phantom Menace, where it feels like we're like walking the Death Star, trying to do stuff like A New Hope, and just giving like the Imperial like accentuations to like the space, and we're having like, a bunch of stormtroopers in this form of like the next gen Dark Troopers of the Beskar. And the fact that we're cutting between our action sequences, it feels a little like Phantom Menace in terms of the way we're just kind of juxtaposing the editing. And we have a lot of nods to Phantom Menace in terms of the action, with the Darth Maul of it all, but with Gideon's kind of new aesthetic, but particularly, like the one of the great sequences, the little little hallway force field thing that R5 is assisting Din Djarin with. I don't know. I just kind of like that. Again, it's kind of like Filoni, kind of like in a sense, he's kind of again that one's more just like a broad, just kind of feeling I have towards like the tone of that. Just, it feels like kind of a nice kind of like mixture of old Star Wars and the prequel Star Wars, through Mando.
No, I agree. I actually love those subtle comparisons, those subtle hints and homages, if you will, to
Yeah,
Maul. Maul is by far my favorite character in the Star Wars universe. So yeah, it is really cool to get that without it being outright obvious. I appreciate an Easter egg like that versus something that's sometimes a little bit more like fan servicey.
for sure, for sure. I mean, like again, it's just when we had our rematch, we had like two rematches: Moff Gideon versus Din Djarin, and Moff Gideon versus Bo Katan. And with the Din Djarin fight, I like that it's kind of a battle of the foundling and the wannabe foundling. In terms of Din Djarin was a foundling, and this guy wishes he was a foundling of the Jedi, more accurately, like the Sith. And again, he's as I say, he's kind of going to be like the Sith who ruled Mandalore. Essentially, this guy's been aspiring for power like for all these years. The guy wants power. At least he wants these tools. He wants the basically he's like the ultimate Star Wars fan. He wants the iconography of Star Wars at his disposal. He's a very I love is how ego driven he is. He wants to make a clone army, the most impeccable, like just basically the most impeccable and force to be reckoned with, army that is a force to be reckoned with in the galaxy.
Forced to be reckoned with.
That is all him. That looks exactly like him. He wants again. He's building a legacy for himself as well. He wants to endure. I mean, like that's what the clone troopers usually we just picked a rank and file guy to be all of them. Like the Emperor didn't make them all look like him. This guy, the vanity on this guy,
Yeah.
you know. So these are the touches I live for with Gideon. I love how he killed Moff Gideon too. At least seemingly, it's Star Wars, so you never know. But let's assume we dropped a Star Cruiser on him. That's pretty cool.
I really hope he's not gone though. I mean, to be fair though, the Star Cruiser didn't actually
I
fall
know
on him.
he was a fireball, but still, I mean, you're right. Though. I mean, we did
I
kill
mean,
all the clones beforehand, though, so that's the thing makes me think maybe he's not coming back. I don't know.
that would be such a wasted opportunity to take him out like
But if
that.
it's the last season, though, of this, if it's like before this movie thing, assume we don't do a season 4. I mean, if we did kill him off this way, wouldn't that be a good way to go out, though? And wouldn't it though? If we knew we weren't getting more of him, like in a series per se, and we've set up Thrawn. Thrawn is likely going to be the big. If we don't have Thrawn mainly like as the big bad in Ahsoka, or if we like Ahsoka could be a thing where we build the Thrawn, then we do the movie to have Thrawn as the big bad. That possibly is a way that could go. Might not go that way, but it could. I mean, if we don't have Moff Gideon in the mix for that, I mean, this might be the way to take him out.
I kind of wish we would see more of him. I said they probably killed him off because at this point they're unsure if they were getting the 4th season.
I mean, that's entirely possible as
But
well. That's probably why we didn't see a body. So
It's just like I don't know. There's a number of these little instances where if they decided that the Mandalorian was done with season 3, I'd be fine with it. I'd be fine with them saying, "Fine, he's dead," and Din and Grogu sort of live happily ever after on Navarro. I'm fine with that. But if the series continues, Moff Gideon needs to be the series villain. He's perfect from so many different, perspectives. As I even said earlier, he is the reason why the Mandalorians are almost non-existent in the galaxy.
I know, yeah, no, for sure, yeah. So, how do you feel about a lot of people are curious about this? How do you feel about the dark saber break, Casey? Like, where do you come down on it? Because a lot of people are
Oh,
upset by it.
I am not happy about that.
Okay, now I'd like to ask you why. Why aren't you happy about that?
For a couple reasons. One, the dark saber has a lot of cultural significance, not only within the Mandalorians, but it also just has a lot of significance of something very different with what's the guy's name?
Pre Vizsla? Oh, Tar Vizsla?
No, Tar Vizsla. Yeah, so I really love all that. It's had a big role in Clone Wars, in Rebels, in Mandalorian, and then for it to literally just be broken like that. But I guess also it's like part of a new era of the
Yeah,
Mandalorians.
that's the
I can
thing.
so I get that, but it's also just such a cool lightsaber.
I know,
It's something
yeah.
so unique that still feels very fitting to the universe. That's that. I mean, I'm not angry about it. Don't get me wrong, but it's just like, oh no, why did that happen?
I mean, here's my issue with it. Because one, I mean, I err on the side of it's symbolic and or it's like a redemptive moment for Bo-Katan. It's like this thing's been keeping her down, and she just kind of gets destroyed, but she doesn't need it. But on the flip side, though, what bothers me about it is the fact that we don't take a beat to discuss or really let it sink in. It's just kind of an in the moment thing, and like no one really brings up like the dark saber. It's gone. I don't know. It feels a little like it just feels like we have these moments that we're not like fully confirming. It's a little left a little too in the air. We have that, and again, as I mentioned, the helmet thing in the Creed when Ragnar gets the ceremony again. Where again, I think you're right, Casey, but I wish we had like a line to confirm it one way or another because it's like we leave it out of the Creed at the end. And I mean, I get it's a lot to read into in terms of like, so are we undoing the helmet thing? Or are we just going to let it play going forward? Like it's going to be optional now, and we're going to let people choose between the two factions that they're going to be. I don't know. It's like we could have looped that into like, and it's a new era where people will be able to choose. It's like a little line you could have like fit in somewhere when we're doing like our big like welcome to the Forge moment. I don't know.
I mean, I think, if we get another season of The Mandalorian or if we see more of The Mandalorians, we'll very quickly tell if that's the case. But I don't
Yeah.
think, I personally don't think it is. I think
There's gonna be a lot of waiting until then, though. That's the thing.
yeah, I mean, but overall though, with this whole finale, like I said, if it ended up being the series finale, it ended well enough, and then I think you could just look back at this series as a very mid Star Wars show, but a very important Star Wars show that kind of is helping revitalize after the incident that is the sequel trilogy.
Right. So,
Also, I just want to quickly say too, and I meant to say it earlier, but like, I did have another small little gripe too with the something else in the finale where it was just really stupid that after Din kills all of the clones of Moff Gideon in the most like cliche fashion reveals his entire plan for the clones and what they were going to do and this, that, and the other. And it was just
well, he
like
already did that in the last episode, though.
he told about
Yeah.
the force sensitive. Wait, what?
Well, if he didn't, I'm pretty sure I could have sworn he said it, but at the very least, it was heavily implied. I mean, that was his whole. He said he was building a perfect army. We just now saw the face of the army was him.
Okay, well, like building a perfect army, that's that's
And he
one
said he was
thing.
combining Jedi and cloners in this. I mean, it's pretty. I think it was pretty well to infer like what the deal was there. And we saw, and we the audience saw like he was getting blood from Grogu and everything. We see clones. I don't know. I guess we had like the piece of it. I don't know.
But yeah, I think also there's a huge part of screenwriting where they say show don't tell, and it's just a big exposition piece like you killed my perfect clone army, the clones of myself. They were going to be my soldiers. They were going to be force sensitive. It's like what are you doing? Like
Fair
you're
point.
literally about to fight this guy. We should have just had an Indiana Jones moment where the Mando like shoots him or something. Yeah.
Yeah. Can you
I don't
imagine
know.
if in Star Wars at some point, because I don't think they've ever done this yet, at some point we just got to do a scene in Star Wars where, in an equivalent to Raiders, but the one thing that would separate from the rest is we just shoot someone in the face in Star Wars.
Yeah, they'll never shoot someone in the face.
Instead of saying like we don't graphically show, we just like it takes aim, bam, and we just showed like the body from the neck down falling, like just like out of focus, but he just fell, it was just blast, bam, and just fall.
I mean, the closest things you'll ever get to that, which still surprised me that they're even in the Star Wars universe, is when Anakin beheads Dooku and when Mace beheads Jango.
Yeah, well, Django's easier because he has like a helmet on. That one's easier.
Yeah, well, the original Django scene was much more graphic.
Really?
Mace Windu. You can find the clips online. Mace Windu, like he slices him up.
Ooh, oh, you mean he did more than just the head?
Yeah, he slices him up, but then they were just like, "This is too much. We just kind of need to kind of make it more clean and simple."
I gotta admit, it would be kind of what we have is enough. But I mean, if Boba Fett saw that, my God, he would really in that when that one Clone Wars episode, he would have really just like instantly tried to stab Mace when he would have just like, oh God, I really hate this guy. He traumatized me for life. I'm gonna torture him like he tortured my poor father.
Yeah,
That would
I
have
mean,
killed him.
yeah, I mean, also, I think if you look closely when Django does die,
Mhm.
his head actually pops out of the helmet.
Well, I know you see like a little bit of it. You're saying like the helmet, like full on, like
Well,
came out.
I'll send you the full deleted scene, but in the actual cut of the movie, right after Mace Windu cuts his head off and his
Mhm.
head flies across or his helmet flies across the battlefield,
Yeah.
you see the shadow of his head fly out of his helmet and roll across the battlefield.
Huh. Interesting.
Yeah, definitely go check it out. It's not something I ever noticed as a kid. I didn't notice it until like way later in life.
Okay.
Uh, but yeah, they're not. They're usually very careful about how they display graphic stuff. But yeah, I'll send you the deleted scene. But yeah, he definitely slices and stabs him up quite a bit in
Okay.
the deleted scene.
So, IG-11. So he's the new marshal. Here's the thing that bothers me about IG-11. Just with that whole story is that I brought this up. Episode 6, we have the Ugnaughts there, and you'd think at like the end of that episode, Din Djarin would say, "Hey guys, can you help me? My friend who was an Ugnaught. He helped redeem this droid that tried to kill my baby, and we kind of befriended each other. And could you, can you give me that memory circuit thing that I needed from the first episode? Could you guys like help me build that sort of thing?" He's like, "Oh yeah, sure. Here you go. I've spoken. Bye." We it's just like you'd think he would have at least asked, right?
Yeah, it would have been nice, but
Yeah, but we didn't. We turned him into a mech. But then we got another one. We just bought a new one. Had the same voice, so it's kind of an homage. I mean, it's a nice homage, and it's like okay, we have a marshal. It's kind of like we turned the living statue. They turned the statue into like a living marshal. It's kind of cool. And then more importantly, we got Din living on Navarro with little Grogu, and it's a nice kind of Western ending.
Yeah, as I said during their actual video, it's just like when we actually did the episode, it's like if this is actually the last we see of Mando and Grogu, at least they ended up in a nice place.
That's what I'm saying. I mean, ultimately, you look at Mando, what it kind of turned into compared to, I think, what we all thought it was going to be in the first place. I mean, at the end of the day, with this season, it's like it's about family and community ultimately being restored. That's kind of what this season was about. And that's what this last episode really brought home. It's family and community.
and that's what I was, that's what I was just saying earlier. Like it's like the series or the season ends on a good enough note where I could believe it's the series finale because it's not only a good ending for Mando and Grogu, but it's a good ending for Grief Karga in Navarro and also just the Mandalorian culture in general. Like I could accept this as the series finale, and in some ways, I kind of want it to be the series finale.
Yeah, I could say that's the thing. I'm honest. I'm at a place where I too am hoping that it's the end of the series, and then we're going to see our characters pop up again in the movie, in the big crossover movie that
Yeah,
I
I
wasn't
just
really want to. They could always pop up in other things, hopefully not in a way that's gonna like hopefully in the season 2 territory, not like, hey, first big season, and here's guest stars galore that we don't need.
yeah, I don't think it's going to be the end. I think we are getting another season because I've read so many different reports about so many possible things for season 4. And granted, yeah, we do have that movie that's potentially in play. But one of the big ones that I heard was that in the upcoming season, when they were talking about season 4, is that while we're not going to potentially get season 4 for another like couple years anyway, because there's just too many other Star Wars projects in the works, that Bo is actually going to take a back seat in this upcoming season, and we're going to get I guess like I guess like she's going to be replaced by what's his name, Carson, the
Oh,
New
Carson
Republic.
Teva, the New Public guy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that he was going to potentially like kind of take her place as, like here's, someone Mando's kind of like kicking around with and, doing these odd jobs with.
I mean, honestly, I thought they were at some point. I think I'm thinking the Patty Jenkins thing. The Red Squadron, like it feels like a little. I'm not saying like she was going to do this idea specifically for
Rogue.
that, but
I think you mean Rogue Squadron.
thank you, the Rogue Squadron. I know what. Yes, Rogue Squadron. I'm not saying this is going to be literally that idea, but it feels like similar to like we're just going to follow kind of the guys who fly around the galaxy patrolling it. So that makes me think we're probably not going to do that. But I mean, it's possible because he has been in all the seasons. So I mean, they could bring him in. Would be
it's very uncertain what the future is going to hold, but we have so many. I don't necessarily want to call them loose endings, but we have so many open little endings for a number of characters that we saw in this past season. I mentioned Elliot Kane, and I mentioned Vane, the pirate guy.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. So we have 3 characters right there who have the potential to go on to do something more.
Yep.
So.
All right. Okay, well, I guess, Jay, let's return to the main. Okay. All right, so I want to thank Casey for kind of talking through all these again with us, giving us something to talk about. Kind of like something to re-explore here. And I'm gonna call it a night on Mando. Now that we've kind of talked through as much as we can really talk about, just like literally recapping everything we are recapping 8 episodes again. Yeah, this is the end. We'll maybe see it for season 4 of Mando, or at the very least, we'll see this big crosser movie. We'll definitely be back to recap, Ahsoka when that comes. Very excited for that, and I guess at some point Skeleton Crew, but we'll see.
All
right.
Good night.
So, all right, that'll do it for us this week as we holster our remotes till the next installment. Calls for the draw, Mano y Mano, or Mando y Mando, just Plus and Us.
Hey, good night. Hondo, see you soon.
Hondo has spoken.
You have spoken, Hondo has spoken.